Hi there, and welcome to Bourbon Turntable. We are the show that blends the love of whiskey with the love of music. And with me tonight, as always, is my friend Drew Crawley. Drew, good to see
Hey,
you.
good evening, everybody. You as well. You as well.
Yeah.
How's everybody feeling?
Good. Making it. Gonna
Good.
get a lot better here in just a minute when we sample some Limestone Branch whiskey here.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. Hey, and our guest host tonight,
Oh,
Patrick, my whiskey den. Welcome.
Yeah. I'm staying over, so I'm on the show tonight.
Oh my goodness. Hey, and we have a very special guest with us tonight, Stephen Fante, who is the brand ambassador, among many other things, at Limestone Branch Distillery. Stephen, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we'll dig into a little bit more with Stephen here in just a second, but we wanted to let you know just a couple of things real quick. Our show is part of the Bar Cart Co-op. Bar Cart Co-op is a collection of good whiskey friends, and we have some different shows. We have Distillers Talk that those shows drop every Thursday, and that features Alan Bishop and Christy Atkinson. We have My Whiskey Den, which airs on Monday nights with Patrick and Mike and Ben. And we have our show that Drew and I are doing, and we have great special guests like Patrick from time to time, and we have wonderful special guests such as Stephen. But before we get into more of that, we have a very special announcement for you.
Don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, hit that bell notification. Don't forget to comment if you're watching live in the chat. Leave a comment down below afterwards. Always remember that thumbs up.
Thank you, Mike, for that very special announcement. You always do such a great job for us with it. You have supreme talents in that area. All right, so let's get going here. We want to talk with Stephen, and we want to taste some whiskey. We have several things that we're going to be trying tonight, the first of which is the Limestone Branch experimental bottle. This is a 94 proof, 100% malted rye. This pick is actually from Westport Whiskey and Wine here in Louisville. So guys, go ahead, Pat and Drew, go ahead and kind of be doing some work on that first pour while we get to know Stephen a little bit. So Stephen, how long have you been with Limestone Branch?
9 years.
9 years. Now, what was your background? What were you doing before you got into working with Limestone Branch? Were you in the whiskey business at that point?
No, I had been in and around the whiskey business, but I wasn't in it. I was in the coffee industry. And for 26 years, I had a key account, which was Brown-Forman Corporation in downtown Louisville, the international headquarters for all of Jack Daniels, Corbel Champagne, Lennox China, Hartman Luggage. They owned it all when I was down there on their campus, amongst Old Forester in early times. And I got a chance to be in every coffee kitchen on that campus, which is about 36 coffee kitchens on the campus. So I got to know everybody from Lincoln Henderson to Lois Matus to Owsley Frazier. I would see them on campus. They knew me by name, and it was a neat experience to have that kind of inside. Everything on Brown-Forman's campus is completely secured and locked down. You do not enter without proper identification, and I had full access identification to every floor and every level because I was the coffee guy.
You were the coffee guy.
You're the one who made everyone happy. You know what I mean?
It did help. When you're in a confined circumstance like they were in their cubicle or in their office and, for many hours during the day, they had a coffee kitchen that was their solace and their solitude. They also had executive dining, which was extraordinary, and that's a whole nother level. At the time, there was top 100 executives for Brown-Forman Corporation that were allowed to eat in the executive dining room, and I got to eat there 3 or 4 times. Mm-hmm. So it was an extraordinary experience. The chefs there, incredible, over the top, Donnie. I still remember today that he was the man that turned me on to chicory coffee. Chef Donnie at Brown Forman Corporation grew all his own herbs right there in the parking lot, in between the rows of the cars. He grew his own herbs. He was an amazing guy.
That's so the lesson there is, if you want to infiltrate the deepest, darkest secrets of any organization, be the coffee guy.
I ran into Lois Matuse 3 times on the campus in one day. She said, Fante, you know more about this damn campus than I do. I said, I know who's getting fired today, too. I've been in the coffee kitchen. You want to know? She said, you're an idiot. Get out of my hair.
So now your role, I guess your one of your roles is being the brand ambassador there, and you were recently named the double platinum best overall brand ambassador from the Ascot Awards. I think this is the first time Ascot Awards has even handed this thing out. I don't know that they'll ever even hand it out again now, but congratulations.
Thank you very much. Honored that Fred would recognize me, and of course I've been on his podcast before and on his show before, and it's always a good time to be around him. He's an Oklahoma boy originally, and my mother's an Oklahoma girl originally, and we have some common interest in that. And of course Fred was military, and you know how much I support our United States military and everything that they do for our country. So all of which makes him my huckleberry. But I am not wearing an ascot all year, regardless of what Beam says I have to do now that I have the award.
Well, we've got an Oklahoma connection for you as well.
Yep. I grew up in Shawnee, Oklahoma, a little bit southeast of Oklahoma City. So very familiar. Okay, I know, right? We used to play them in basketball every summer. Yep. Been there. Good deal, man.
The Illinois River.
Probably get in a lot of trouble if we were ever to get back to Oklahoma together, I would imagine.
I think we could stir something up.
Oh, goodness.
So obviously the award is a great thing, and it's a great honor, but what do you think makes you a great brand ambassador?
You know, there's a lot of things. One of which is the amount of repetition that I had to go through in order to sell a lot of coffee across the United States. Understanding how to present and understanding how to cup, taste. I'm Golden Cup certified. It's on the wall behind me one of these ways. I think it's right there, Golden Cup certification. And that is the highest certification in coffee cupping, nosing, tasting, and brewing standards and roasting. And I was made that. I believe it was Consumer's Choice Coffee Company that sent me up to Golden Cup certification. And at the time, I believe I was one of 14 in the nation Golden Cup certified trainers. So not only do I know how to nose and cup coffees, I also know how to taste and break down bourbons. It's very similar. And in the early days at John Conti, once I became a salesperson for him, I was very passionate about the iced tea that we had. Not many people in the company were. And so he handed me the tea division of the company and said, look, you're passionate about it. What I need is somebody that's passionate about this. It's about 7% of the company sales. And I took it up extremely to the highest point that it had ever been in the company sales, with Conti iced tea being a brand of mine. And importing all the teas with Mark Nethery and I, we tasted through tons of different teas and brought our tea program up to the highest standard. Mr. Conti took me to the Russian tea room and let me work with the staff there in Manhattan to learn a little bit about how high tea is served and what it's all about. And so, yeah, my background as a tea sommelier for John Conti Coffee Company came into play. I got an opportunity to do all those tastings, and that really refined my palate for tasting and presentations and things like that. And then we needed to up our standard in the actual distillery tours And I took over tours and tastings, and every half hour of every day, I gave a 30-minute tour. When I'd walk out of the room, I'd walk right back into the next tour. I gave all the tours for about 3.5 years straight. Wow. And so when it comes to actually giving a tour, well, I've given billions of them. So when I'm in front of people, it's not a situation where I'm at all, awkward. It's more that they're awkward because I'm so intense. And the intensity, I think, is what comes across is passion. And I believe they, for the most part, I get good reviews. Most people don't freak out. A few of them have. A couple of them ran out with their hair on fire.
Don't doubt that.
Here you are in doing a tour. Is one that I was fortunate enough to be on. Oh, I don't know, maybe about a year ago, and you were actually giving the tour that day, and it's a treat. It really is. And I believe this room is called the Church of Fante. Is that correct?
No, it's the Church of Stephen.
Oh, Church of Stephen.
Whichever one of our pastors are in the church at the time is what it's being held by. It could be Stephen Beam. It could be Stephen Fante. Whichever pastor's in the church at the time is who's preaching the choir.
But it doesn't show in this picture, and I apologize for that. But there are two little plate glass windows in that room. So
stained glass. We stole it out of the Vatican. Sorry, Popa.
Hey guys, Pat, Drew, let's start talking about this Limestone Branch rye whiskey now. Stephen, as these guys are going to share some of their thoughts on it, do I understand correctly that these are going away? Is that right?
At the moment, we have pretty good stock of them left that I am not selling to anyone because we're not making any more at the moment. The laboratories and things that we have now are much more sophisticated. You can do a lot more in the facilities that we have in our adjacent partners. So Mr. Beam is able to access all that stuff at any time he wants to. So he's got a little bit more sophisticated than the Connex container is currently today. However, it's an extraordinary piece of our history. And to really figure out is brilliant on his part to really figure out what our customers are going to want in the future. If you're a distiller and you have to think 6 years out and figure out what's going to be popular, how the heck do you even think that far in advance? I can't remember what I got to take to work tomorrow. So I got to double check myself the next morning. He's thinking 6 years out. And so one of the ways to do that is to quick age some whiskeys in quarter casks that are the same liquid to wood ratio as 53-gallon barrels.
Right.
A quarter cask, 15-gallon barrel is the perfect liquid to wood ratio. And in about 2 years, you can taste what you're going to look like at 4. And at about 3 to 4 years, you're looking at what you're going to taste like at 6 to 8. And it's an extraordinary way to taste this with the general public and see if their palates match up with yours. And they buy it off the shelves. The more that moves through the gift shop, the more contemplation we have to put that into full production.
Well, this particular bottle is 24 months old.
Pretty awesome.
Yeah,
I remember that bottle. I've got a bottle of it in my kitchen up on top. I'm saving it.
Yeah.
Yep. Pretty great.
Yeah. So what do you think, guys?
For what we were talking about, like forecasting in the future, like looking back maybe like 3 or 4 years, you were seeing rye become big. I'm loving more of the malted ryes when I'm having them. I like that extra depth, a little bit of earthiness to it that you get. And I'm not a fan of anise, so that kind of washes out a little bit when that happens for me. So I enjoy it that way. This is neat because it's got a nice like mid-level rich maltiness, but then I'm getting some high notes, almost like an apricot or a pear on the top end of it, which is really interesting. Sorry.
The viscosity, the mouthfeel on it is extraordinary. It's over the top.
Extremely
wonderful.
Yep.
And it's married together well, which is one of the things I mean, it's not like you're pulling a lot in there, but the whole way through, there's not a big peak or a valley. It's just an enjoyable trip through it, which as you go along, sometimes you don't mind getting slapped around by something, but I was going to say what you're going to have more frequently is something like this that's really enjoyable. So.
Yeah. Drew, what do you think?
Yeah, I would agree with everything that Pat said. This is always going to be one of my favorites. I mentioned, I think, before we started recording that I try to pick these up in as many numbers and as often as I possibly can.
Yeah.
But this one's a little bit different, and kind of knowing Chris and his palate over at Westport, this makes sense because he's always looking for that kind of off-profile thing. But, you get a lot of this brown sugar kind of thing, nosing-wise, and I'm drinking out of a little bit different glassware because I'm out of my normal routine today. But get an herbal thing, almost like basil on the nose. And I don't know if that's just because we were just discussing the herb garden before, or sometimes things get stuck in your head. But then the back end has always reminded me of kind of this great Jolly Rancher, like Steven said. It's got this viscosity, this sweet kind of candy note. If you put this in front of me and gave me 10 guesses, I think the last thing I might guess would be a malted rye. It's completely different than just about anything else in the category, and I love it. So big fan of these.
Yeah, I agree. There's some apricots, the fruit that first came to mind when I was trying it, and that, man, this is, I love. We talked about Chris Zaborowski already, and we're drinking one of his picks. But one of the things that I heard him say once was he wants the nose of a whiskey to seduce him. Okay, and I love that language about it, and this definitely does that. You could just sit here and nose this thing forever because it's just so pleasant. But there is that brown sugar and that apricot and that grape Jolly Rancher thing is I think spot on as well. Steven, are we in the ballpark, buddy?
I like to say it's the most unique thing in whiskey I've ever drank. I've drank a lot of scotch. I've drank a lot of whiskey. I've drank a lot of, spirits in general, and that's different than anything that I've ever come across.
Yeah, I think we could sit here if we had the bottle and we're sitting around on one of our back porches, and we just passed it around for a while till unfortunately it came to an end. I think that we would probably continue to find interesting layers of tasting notes and flavor profiles the whole evening because it's just really well done. So looking forward to these getting back in circulation, and because we're all a big fan of it.
With the amount of flavor in it, it almost drinks like a cocktail. Like there's a lot going on in there where it almost feels like that.
That's an interesting take. I like it.
Yep. I've actually served this with a Manhattan with no vermouth, just done a little bit of the sugar and a little bit of the maraschino or bourbon soaked cherry juice. It kills.
All right. Hey, let's guys, next let's pour the Yellowstone family recipe.
All right.
And we'll, while we're doing that, we'll get Steven to tell us a little bit about the background on this family recipe, and because this is fairly new release, correct?
Yes, sir. It was released at Yellowstone National Park just recently, their 150th anniversary, and then we brought it to the Distillery gift shop, and that's where it's at currently. It has not been released to the nation, as far as I know. However, it is a 6-year-old. It is 100 proof. It's done from one distillery with one distiller throughout a season, and therefore everything about that would make this a bottled in bond, which I like to say Bernie Lubbers gets very excited about. There's another bottled in bond.
Yes, he does.
However, in order for us to get enough juice, because we're a craft distillery on pot stills, we had to use more than one season. And in doing so, that killed it as a bottled in bond. Sorry, Bernie.
So all of this is distillate that you guys produced at Limestone Branch, correct?
This is Mr. Beam's grandfather's mash bill. This is Guy Beam's mash bill. This was found behind a bookcase at Guy Beam's house and handwritten. And Stephen Beam found it, and he decided this is something he had to make. It was also Minor Case Beam's yeast strain used in this distillate. So, yeah, it's as family as you can get.
Yeah, and the yeast was from the donut jug that's on display at the distillery.
Beam's donut jug.
Yeah.
Yep.
Scraped by Patrick Heist himself. Dr. Heist scraped it at Firm Solutions, found himself a candidate in his cryogenic laboratory that was a genetic match and was proof to everyone that it was Minor Case Beam's yeast strain from 100 years ago. Wow. Jurassic Park style.
Yes.
Bring it back.
Yes.
A whiskey from depths of yesteryear.
So this will be a recurring release. Is that correct?
I do not know.
Okay. Well, if you don't, I don't know that anybody knows. So
I never ask.
Yeah. And the mash bill on this is what?
75% white corn, 13% rye, the rest in malted barley.
Mm-hmm.
And from what folks have told me in their experience, they get that mashiness on it on the front end, and it softens out toward about the second or third taste of it. It's a very unique and polarizing taste when you first encounter it, and then it smooths up. The 100 proof kind of smooths out. Not that it's obtrusive on the first taste, it's just different. And that's one of those things that Stephen Beam loves. Any master distiller that I've ever come across has always said, I like the unique things, the things that I haven't tasted in whiskey. I've tasted so much whiskey in my life, and now I've got something different. And that's what I think is a perfect description of the family recipe. It's different, and it's awesome.
Yes.
Yep.
You can tell that it's a little mash forward when you're getting into there. I mean, it almost, I don't want to say it, the mouth feels like that, but you really feel like you're almost going on like tasting the grains going through. This is really interesting.
Yeah. And then it softens out and plateaus out, and all of a sudden you're at the wow zone. And that's about the third sip for me on that particular tasting. I was like, that changed to me dramatically from the first sip till the third.
Yes, big time.
No.
Yeah,
go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, my girlfriend and I, about a month ago, we brought some family up to Kentucky from various states, and we did some tours and whatnot, and started with this one. We took a tour with, I think, Paige, and this one was the first day that they had this on the lineup, and I was just blown away how distinct it was from the other things that were on the tasting lineup that day. We had some malted rye, we had some of the Minor Case, we had the Bowling and Birch gin, and we tried this one. And yeah, just like what Pat said, but that the mash comes through, and then just that back end just really mellows out, becomes very gentle and approachable in kind of a dangerous way, as I learned later that day after a cigar on your patio. And but man, fantastic stuff.
So, if you don't care, talk a little about some big happenings that occurred with you guys, with your business early last year when MGP bought out Luxco, and how has that impacted Limestone Branch, and what are the positives for you and Steve Beam going forward?
Well, it gives us a lot more cash flow, and when you're in a bourbon business, the one thing that people do not expect is distribution is such a tough thing. And I think that's where, Don saw an opportunity. Don Lux saw an opportunity to parlay this thing into generational money, and to also parlay it into a partnership that was needed by both parties. MGP did not have a bottling line. Don Lux has an extraordinary bottling line. I've had the opportunity to go there. I've seen 5,000-gallon vats of whiskey being blended together, and I almost dove in. They grabbed me by the ankle and they said, "No, son, you will not float." I said, "But I'm going to be dying happy." No, it just makes sense that they needed a bottling line, and we got a bottling line. They also needed some rick houses. We've got some rick houses. They also need, they're building some rick houses themselves. What they truly needed more than anything is the expertise of seasoned sales professionals. And I have never worked with a better sales team than the Luxco state managers. They are extraordinary. They're sharp. They're on target, and they understand every one of their states, which each one is totally different.
Right.
And that's something that one person cannot even anticipate when they go into getting into the whiskey business. And MGP was making whiskey for everybody else. Now they're making it for themselves. And when you make it for yourselves, you have to have that ability to go in there and present these things to all these different distributors. And then the distributors have to be able to present it to their employees, to present it to the liquor stores and to the bars. It's a very complicated, very tiered system. And when you've already got a company that has 50 states and 13 countries that you can turn the key on, you got something there. That's a huge benefit to them and to us too, to have them as our partner. So they come with lots of years of experience with 5 huge column stills. I bought a barrel of whiskey from them. I went on a pick over there. I got a chance to go with the yeast expert, and I toured the entire facility with the yeast expert, which was Patrick Heiss would have lost his mind. He would have loved that whole tour. I was wishing that I could channel my inner Patrick Heiss, but it's just not there.
Well, if you're going to channel Patrick Heiss, you've got to talk about Slayer. So,
that's the other side of it. Hey, Fante, when you're in New Orleans, you got to take Beam to this bar. They got great music. Our ears were bleeding. And I was sitting at the bar going, "What the hell is this heist has got us into?" But they had Yellowstone. So we drank a glass.
There you go.
And then we ran out.
Oh, all right, guys. So let's talk about this family recipe. You brought up a couple things here real quick, but Drew, kick us off here, bud.
Yeah, I was just super, super impressed with this one. Anytime a brand has some kind of merger or sourcing agreement and then make a transition away from it, I'm always curious to try it out, right? And so this one really, really impressed me. At 10 o'clock in the morning, I would say this is about my time for peak palate. And I remember really, really liking this one the first time. On second visit, it doesn't disappoint whatsoever. Get a little bit, like you were saying, kind of the distiller's beer kind of notes, not in an unpleasant way, but you guys remember those Dragon Puff cereals from like early 2000s? They were like the sweet corn puff type things. You get a lot of that on the nose. Maybe that's one of my Mandela effect memories. I don't know. But get a lot of that. And then kind of back in, like I said, mellows out. Get a little bit of like a dark chocolate, a little bit of a coconut kind of a note, more of that tropical fruit. Kind of reminds me of an Almond Joy candy bar. I really, really like this. The proof is great. Price point's great. I like kind of the more and more tie-ins to y'all's story, which I think is one of the strongest things you have going for you. And so it was cool to get to come back to this one. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah. No. Patrick?
When I was just sipping on this, what I was thinking of was when we tasted the mash the other day and we got that little bit of a raspberry note in it. I'm fine on the backside, but it's a little bit heavier. But I was going to say that wasn't expecting. I was like, when I stuck my finger in it to taste that there, but it is coming through on the backside of this, which is neat. But yes, obviously the grain a little bit more forward in the middle. I like that. That's not aggressive. Bright brown sugar kind of lightens up halfway through. It's a little dominant, but man, it rounds off really nicely and fades. It's going to make you want to go back for more. It's just a little bit of drying on top of the tongue to be like, replenish myself. Go back.
Yes. It's calling out to you. It's Patrick.
I'll have to go get more.
There's and Drew threw out kind of an obscure food reference, and I'm going to do the same. there's a cookie that I see. They come in usually around the holidays. They come in those boxed sleeves of cookies, and it's like a dark chocolate, and then there's some caramel on it, and there's some nuts on it, and they're just very, very tasty. And I kind of get that in my memory, in my tasting memory when I'm drinking this. It's it's aged 6 years, but you still feel like you're getting the grain, the grain taste in it as well. It's a great balance between a younger, grain forward craft whiskey and something that's got that aged and allowed more flavors to develop with some time in that barrel. But there's a hint of oak, but it's not at 6 years. It's not over oaked at all. I think it's very, very deftly handled to get it to that age. So I'm a fan.
Now, are these 15-gallon barrels too, or are these 53s?
No, those are 53s.
53s. Okay.
Yes.
Do you know what the char was on those by chance?
3 char.
3? Okay. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
It's very good.
There's just a little...
Those barrels would have been toasted first and charred second. Those barrels would have come from Missouri. That would have been independent stave in Missouri. And they do the specialty barrels for independent stave out of that. So it would have been toasted first and then 3 charred after, giving it more depth of flavor characteristics.
Yeah. I was going to say, and you get the little bit of the toasted note on the edge when you have some, like, I figured 3 because it wasn't overpowering that way. But I'm like, there was a little more warmth to it. Not like heat-wise, but just, I don't know, add a little bit extra to it there.
Yeah. No, it's not harsh at all. But as we'll see when we taste this single barrel, the next one, it's quite striking in contrast to it. So, so we'll start to pour that here in just a second, and then we're going to start talking with Stephen about some music stuff. So that'll be fun too. But before we, as we're finishing up side A of the show, getting ready to flip over to side B, we want to talk about a company that's near and dear to Stephen's heart, and that is Fante's Coffee. Stephen, tell us about this.
Well, my brother was the past president of the Specialty Coffee Association of America, and he and I worked together for 26 years in the coffee industry. During my time at John Connie for 16 years approximately, and then again at Consumer's Choice, and then we both transitioned into Royal Cup together. And so we spent quite a few years working side by side and on different projects of our own, and then on the same projects when it came to be. He was downsized as I was from Royal Cup, and at that point we both had to reinvent ourselves. And his reinvention was to buy a local location and to go into business as Fante's Coffee. The 4 beans that are there are for all the Leos: my father, my grandfather, my brother, and his son. His son is the one that actually breaks the actual circle, and being the youngest of the Leos. So it's my grandfather. They're all Leos. It's and it is a European-styled coffee house. It's one of the most unique coffee houses in the United States. But for Kentucky to have it, it's an extraordinary gem amongst gems. He has a 10-kilo Ambex roaster, which is the Ferrari of roasters there in the coffee shop itself. And all of his super exotics that he gets are done off of that roastery. Then he has a much larger roastery out in the parking lot that most people do not know exists, that roasts coffees for about 17 coffee shops across the United States under their own private labels. He also has Fante's Coffee in Hilton Head, South Carolina. And the majority of where his money is being made is out of that roastery. That coffee shop up there is just a way to introduce people to the brand and to endear them to the brand. It also has beer, wine, and craft spirits. So if you want a Yellowstone cocktail, you can get that at Fante's Coffee. If you want to go in and have a spirited cocktail, an Irish coffee, you can get that at Fante's Coffee. If you want a Chardonnay or if you want a Merlot, you can get that at Fante's Coffee. So it's a little bit different level than most coffee houses in the fact that he goes to those extremes. Plus, it has a full kitchen, so you can actually eat there. If you're having conferences or meetings, they have a room for that. You can rent the room in the back and have your meetings privately. So it's a very, very neat place, and it's where I get my coffee every morning.
Every morning. Awesome. And you shared this with us as well. This is tell us about this pour over.
Independent stave, and they're set up. So when you go to the barrel manufacturing plant and you want to see how they make and fire the barrels and build barrels, you've got this coffee station set up there, and they are now serving Fante's coffee in pour over. So they've got a water heater, and they've got the filters there, and they put the coffee in, pour the hot water, and they do pour overs. And you can grind your own coffee, buy your own coffee there, take it with you. You can grind it in their grinder. It's a pretty nice little setup they put together.
It's fantastic.
Very fantastic. I love little places where you can try taste and stuff like that. That's just neat.
You're on the Bourbon Trail. You didn't get a chance to get a cup. You ran out the door to catch the bus. You're on the bus with a group of people. You hit Independent Stave early in the morning. What are you looking for? Well, a cup of coffee would be great right now. And there it is. It's right there. So,
Yep.
All right. Well, that's great. So if you're in the Louisville area and you're on the Bourbon Trail, or even if you're not on the Bourbon Trail, if you happen to live here or visit here or whatever, go by Fante's Coffee. You might actually see Stephen there if you get there at the right time of the morning.
True story.
Yep. All right. So we're going to start talking a little bit about music with Stephen. And while we're doing that, guys, we'll go to this, our third and final pour, which is one of these Yellowstone single barrels, of which I have several.
I did look in the cupboard, and I didn't know which one we were drinking tonight.
There was a time where it became a bit of an obsession for me, I have to confess. But all right, so Stephen, do you remember what your first album was? The first album that you bought with your own money, or that you were able to persuade mom and dad to buy for you? Do you remember that first album?
Never bought an album. We had a house full of them. I had two older brothers that always had albums everywhere. So I never bought an album. Didn't have to. I just go steal one of theirs and put it on. It's a true story. My parents had a huge collection of music, and most of that was from the Rat Pack era, the Sinatra, and, all the classics. And I got a good taste of that from my father. He had one of the first whiskey bars, the Delta Bar and Lounge on Market Street in downtown Louisville. And he'd been in the bar business for several years, had 3 bars under his belt when he opened up the most iconic, the Delta Lounge, right across from Vincenzo's and right across from the courthouse, where all of the government officials would come to his card game in the back room of his establishment. It was never raided because the mayor was normally there.
So that's where all the deals got done.
That's the stories that I hear years later.
So what were the albums then that you were stealing from your brother's collection? What were the things that you first got intrigued by?
He had a great taste in music. I was fortunate enough to have a brother 10 years older than I am. And REO Speedwagon was always playing. We had Led Zeppelin. I loved the Doors, Chicago, all these different groups. He had, and he still to this day jams out in his basement. He's got a hell of a sound system and a huge TV, and he has several concerts on CD and that he'll plunk in and play, and live concerts of different people. And it's pretty much like being there when you're in Leo's basement next to his whiskey collection. You're in that's what he loves to do. He loves to listen to music, and loud, very, very loud. Nothing's changed since I was a kid.
So what was your first concert? Do you remember that?
Yes, vividly. I remember that. My dad took me to the fairgrounds in Louisville, Kentucky, and we went to see Willie Nelson play in concert. And it was an extraordinary. It was when Willie was at his prime, and the concert was absolutely, I loved every minute of it. And and I've seen Willie 3 other times since then. So the red-handed stranger and I are no strangers.
Yep. Drew, you're going to see him when?
Wednesday. He'll be over here at Iroquois, and very, very excited. I'm a big fan of the guy that's been opening for him all tour. But as talked about on previous shows, Willie has always had a very special place in my heart through my relationship with my grandfather and kind of my first love in country music. So very, very much in line with you there, Steve.
Willie Whalen and the boys.
Well,
so something that's happened recently is, I play music on the porch when we're doing barrel picks, because in my barrel picks, you're doing them blind. So you're not talking about the pick, and there's an awkward silence there a lot of times after I've told them that we're not going to be talking about this pick while we're doing the pick. And so I turn on some Charlie Crockett, and that was given to me by a gentleman that was an Army Ranger, or he was military special forces. And he told me about Charlie Crockett, and I told him I liked Hank Sr., and he said, well, this guy is Hank Sr. He is a young, vibrant Hank Sr. And so I've been listening to a lot of Charlie Crockett. And then Shannon Lawson is a personal friend of mine, and Shannon is he's played on the Grand Ole Opry 5 times, and is an extraordinary writer, songwriter, and he wrote for Little Big Town, and he's written for several other big country music artists. So what you're listening to out there, a lot of times Shannon has written it. And when you hear this guy's pipes, you're never going to forget him. He did a song about rainy day whiskey out in the barn. And that song was written about Yellowstone, Kentucky straight bourbon, and his grandfather, who was married to a Baptist woman that did not like him drinking in the house. So he had a flour sack out in the barn that he kept a half pint of Yellowstone. And he would slip off on rainy days, and they would go a little sipping in the barn. And so
my
Shannon
kind of
wrote
guy
that song decades ago, and sweet 90 proof. And at the time, that's what Yellowstone was. And it just it never says Yellowstone in the song, but it was written about Yellowstone, Kentucky straight bourbon. Shannon,
that's pretty cool.
Pretty
has that been recorded or put out anywhere where we can find it?
YouTube it.
Okay.
YouTube Shannon Lawson and Rainy Day Whiskey. And when he's at Muscle Shoals singing it, he is taking the pipes to he's preaching.
Nice.
Oh, love it.
I'm always intrigued by the people that write music, and I never feel like they get the credit they should in the grand scheme of things, or the people behind the guy, like one guy, Bushwalker. He's great, but he's also helping how many other people get to where they need to be. And I'm like, that's the part of the story I always want to hear about. I'm like, you're fantastic, but you also lifted how many people up to where they were, or you wrote the song that you thought someone else, had the heart and the soul to do. Is like, it wasn't them. It was this person over here. Then you want to meet that person over there more.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Very few exceptions to that. Maybe Chris Stapleton and Jason Isbell, about the only two that cut their teeth as writers, and at least in country music right now, that are getting their dues, getting their flowers, so to speak.
Yeah. So it's interesting because a lot of the things that you were talking about when you were younger was more top 40 radio, classic, what we would call now classic rock, but now you're moving more towards you're talking about a lot of country acts.
That happened in the years that I was on the ranch in Oklahoma, and my uncle was putting the boots on me, and he took me out on a 3,500 acre cattle ranch, and he taught me how to shoe horses. He taught me how to be a farrier with him in his own barn, where he made his own horseshoes and did all of his own work on his horses. He taught me how to administer medicine to cattle, and because there was nobody else in that area that knew more about animals and veterinary work than my uncle did. And the vets would just literally just hand him the medication and say, go take care of them. And he took care of all of his own cattle, all of his beef cows. And then my cousin, who was the adjacent farm to us, he had 180 head of dairy cattle coming through the barn twice a day. And I got a chance to meet the girls and spend time there in the barn. And there was nothing played in that barn except country music. And it did affect the production of the milk if you changed that station in any way. And those girls would line up in the same order. When they would come to the barn, they would walk in the same order every day. And we had readers on their tags that we could read who it is that's in there and check them for whatever they needed. And so I spent a lot of time in the F-100 pickup truck listening to a lot of great country music by a guy that was one of the last American cowboys in history, Coy Isaacs.
Awesome. So how long were you in Oklahoma then working on the farm?
Well, it had to be shipped down there on trailways come the first day of my vacation from school. And I would spend the next 3 months on the ranch working. And Mom thought, well, if there's any way to teach a boy work ethic, just put him on a hay bale and let him buck hay for the summer. And, so I went down there and worked with my uncle and tried to help best I could, as a buck 10 person could. I was about 110 pounds and about 6'1". The hay bale weighed more than I did. But I did my best to make sure that we got things done, mending fences and everything. It just it was a life experience that I would never give up, and probably the best time of my life.
Wow. So in term, if it say we're getting in the car with you, we've just left Fante's Coffee. You've got your coffee for the morning. You're driving down to Limestone Branch, and we're going to listen to some music. What's playing in Stephen's car?
Pandora, Trampled by Turtles.
Nice. All
More
right.
likely, that's what I'm going to be listening to. If it's not talk radio, I have turned into my father. I listen to a lot of talk radio.
I don't know if your father did it, but do you comment on the talk radio as it's
happening?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Yes.
I was
Louis gets to hear all of it.
My wife said I'm not allowed to watch the news anymore because I just comment the whole time.
Finding yourself talking to yourself is more frequent when you get past 50. At 55, I just have full conversations and don't even care.
Yes. As a fellow 55-year-old, I can attest to that fact. That is true. So you've got a wonderful speaking voice. Do you have a singing voice?
Nah, I've been able to sing a little bit, but most people run out of the room, so I don't know what their problem is, but I sound wonderful.
Yeah. Well, and that's what counts. In all seriousness, do you play an instrument, or are you musically inclined at all in that regard?
My grandmother was extraordinarily musically inclined. I didn't get to meet her. She passed away before I was born, but I have her piano here in the house.
Wow.
And it's a Price Pfister. It's an absolute beautiful upright, and she taught music on it, and the ivory keys are so worn down from so many lessons that she taught on that piano that it just is intriguing to me. She also taught trumpet. She taught trombone. She taught violin, and my aunt was on the Louisville Philharmonic Orchestra as a violinist, and I now have her granddaughter who is a cellist for the Louisville Philharmonic.
Wow.
So the family has a lot of roots. I play what my grandmother Alberta taught me to play was the harmonica, and she was extraordinary with it. and I can play a tune, keep up with some things on the harmonica, but that's about it. And I don't do it often enough to be accurate anymore. So, no, I don't play any instruments, but I might pull out a harmonica if you're deaf enough.
There we go. I can see an evening in the future where we're sitting around drinking some Yellowstone, and Drew's playing his guitar, and you can play the harmonica, and
be fun.
I think we'll make a pretty good evening of that. I
we'll
think
run the neighbors out.
If we share our whiskey, they might stick around. I've heard that.
Yeah, that's
generally the case.
Put up with us at least, huh?
Oh, hey guys, let's talk about this Yellowstone single barrel. This is also from Westport Whiskey and Wine. It is 115 proof, and it was barreled on September 3rd, 2015. So I think I've had this one for a little while, but they're all very, very, very good.
What's the mash bill on this one?
That'd be 68% yellow corn, rye, and barley, and it is a little cornier than the other one, and the fact that it is yellow corn and not white, and it has a depth of complexion to it that is extraordinary. 115 proof was chosen because we tasted it at 102 proof, 109 proof, and 115 proof. Chris chose it at 115 proof for its extraordinary characteristics that it showed at that proof. You drop the water out of the proofing, and you increase the flavor characteristics. Sometimes that gets better. Sometimes that gets worse. Most people do not realize how much proof influences the characteristics of a barrel of whiskey as much as the master distiller or the barrel house manager.
Right.
So what I allow people to do is to come to our porch when they're picking a single barrel and actually put their stamp on their pick, because they're choosing it at the proof that they like the best. And what they will get, they'll get two things. They'll get the exact same flavor characteristics at their store with their clients that they tasted on our porch, because it will have no difference. It was proofed down by a $45,000 Anton Parr. And it was done with a distiller offline for a big portion of his day to do all that proofing. And that's why these other bigger distilleries don't do it, I believe.
Yeah.
And in that, it will haunt them. For every other barrel pick that they ever do at cast strength, where they get a cast strength pull and a dropper of water, and they say, oh, put 3 drops in, and it'll be just like it is when it comes to your store. They'll say, bullshit, because I've had Fante's tasting, and I know just how much that proof influences the characteristics of each one of those jumps.
It's absolutely
From 102 to 109, huge difference. From 109 to 115, extraordinary difference.
Right. And it's not just a lot of people just fall in love with high proof and say, well, I want the highest proof.
That's something that I've taken on as a passion.
Yep.
And Bernie Lubbers took it on. He said, I'm bottled in bond. I'm the bottled in bond guy. And I think that's the greatest thing since sliced bread. He's taken and educated a whole generation of people on what bottled in bond is. Well, Stephen Fante is out there, and he is educating people on what proof truly influences the characteristics. And you cannot just buy everything at cast strength and expect it to be the best. Because sometimes things do not taste as good at 115 when they tasted wonderful at 102. When you take that proof out of there, all of a sudden you've opened up the Pandora's box and you've tasted some things you don't like about that whiskey.
Right.
So I'm trying to teach people across the United States, my generation, that proof is important as anything else in the whiskey is. From the barrel to the cook to the distiller to the mash to the process. The actual proof that it finishes in is something that should be thought of just as in depth as any of that other stuff. And it should come to the bottle at the proof that it tastes the best at, not cast strength, and not the lowest proof. The proof that it tastes the best at is what should go into the bottle.
Right. It's not just saying I want the oldest and highest proof whiskey I can find is a little ignorant, really.
Yes.
And not to be degrading to anybody.
Not at all.
But
not at all.
That's just you.
Until you come across
you don't
one
understand.
That's so old, a 23-year-old bottle of whiskey, and you've tasted it, and it tastes like freaking. You don't even want to drink it. It tastes like toothpicks.
Right.
When you've experienced that and you've realized, oh, well, whiskey doesn't always get better with age.
Right.
Whiskey goes in and out of its ages. Sometimes at 4 years, a whiskey might taste horrible, but then you taste it again at 6 years and you're like, this is the best barrel of whiskey I've ever drank. And then it goes to 8 years and it might go not so great again.
Right.
We've overaged this one. When you're doing a national brand like we do with Yellowstone Select, we mingle barrels from all different sections of the barrel house. And in doing so, we're able to smooth out and give that flavor characteristics that's consistent across the United States and abroad, so that no matter where you buy your Yellowstone Select bourbon, it's going to taste the same in Texas as it does in Italy. You're going to get the same bottle. And that's the most important part about a national brand. These single barrels, that's totally different. That's out the window. We can do whatever we want. If they want to go with a really smoky finish and they find a barrel that has that smoky finish, fantastic. I'm just there to guide them through picking what they feel is the very best thing they could have taken home from our porch to give us a favorable light upon our distillery in their liquor store or in their restaurant.
Yeah.
And I love that you're doing the proofing thing, because though I do typically like a higher proof, it is fantastic when you're tasting whiskey and you're like, nope, it's 47%. Like 55 was bullshit. 47 is a sweet spot. They picked the right thing. Like when you get the chance to have it, you get to have the cast strength maybe from them or at the distillery, and you're like, okay. High credit to knowing that was not right and taking the time to find the right flavor and being like, I don't care what you think. This is it.
Think about all the national brands that are out there that have a proof on them. Now think about this. Who was the person that chose that proof? And what was the depth of actual experimentation on those barrels to find that particular proof? Probably not a lot when you look at it. It's just there's a proof that we wanted at. There it is. TTB's approved it. Okay, we're going to go with it. Boom, it's on the shelf. Now, what about that whiskey at a different proof? Could it have been even better at a different proof? And that's what we found on these on these barrels that we pulled, that they changed so dramatically in different proofs. I've got a technique that I use on the porch. I call it a rapid fire technique. It's taking 2 glasses of whiskey side by side and nosing them back to back, not interrupting your brain. When you do not interrupt your brain, you do not interrupt process. You interrupt the process and you won't pick out nuanced characteristic differentials like you do when you do not interrupt the process. Taste it side by side, back to back. Toss it right back. Taste the flavor characteristics of the first one. Swallow, taste the characteristics of the second one. You've still got in your memory exactly what characteristics you just tasted. And now you've picked up on something that you liked a little bit better or a little bit worse. And so with these mash bills all being the same, with these barrels being about the same age, with these barrels being in the same rick house, the nuanced characteristic differential of what we bring to the table is very minimalistic. So I try to teach people not only to blow across their Glencairn glass, to blow the ethanol off so that they don't blow their olfactory, to also rapid fire them next to each other. When they get down to the final 2 that they're trying to eliminate one, go back to back with it. And it's a technique that I developed as a tea sommelier, doing white teas, doing nosings and tastings of white teas. It's not something that came from the bourbon industry, so you're not going to hear a bunch of bourbon people talking about rapid firing anything. It works for me. It may not work for you, but it's something just to try and see what you think about it. It works real well in our developing the best barrel of whiskey.
And just a minute ago, I was doing that with the Family Reserve and the single barrel. And when you're doing that,
that's totally.
You can smell the different corn. Like you
Way
can tell it's just drastically different.
When I took Freddie Johnson's tour and he smacked the dog, he woke the dog.
Right.
And then you can really smell the grain bill when you do that off a white dog straight off the still, and you wake it up the first time and you smell it, and then you wake it up the second time and you really get into the depth of what grains are involved in that particular mash bill. And when Freddie can tell you what the mash bill is from just smacking his hands together and smelling them, that's pretty freaking awesome sauce.
Yeah.
So that's I use
those are the type of things that intimidate me. I don't want to say intimidate me, but put me in awe of people at some points. You know, I'm like, that's just damn impressive.
No matter how much you know about whiskey, you're never going to know as much as everybody else. It's a true story. I don't care how much I think I know about whiskey. I can always walk into the room with Bill Samuels and be blown away. In a minute and a half, he's blown me away. I'm like, I never even thought about that. You go into the room with Patrick Heist, and he's talking at a level that's 17,000 feet above sea level. He's flying on a different plane. I'm like, what in the hell are you even talking about, Heist? And then you're next door with Beam, and you're hanging out with Stephen Beam, 7th-generation Beam that's had it in his family, all 7 generations. There he is.
There he is.
The man, the myth. And his level of knowledge about bourbon. He called himself a practical distiller because back in the old days, people were yeast makers. They were not master distillers. They were yeast makers. For you to run a successful distillery, you needed to be able to propagate and handle your own yeast.
Right.
And then from that point, you had to understand everything that you needed to know to fix any problems you had in your distillery. And if you could not fix whatever happened in your distillery, if there was wild yeast that came into your place and you couldn't figure it out and you couldn't get it straight, you were not a master distiller. You never should have been called a master distiller, nor should you ever be called a master distiller. And so when they open the doors to a new distillery and somebody comes on staff and says, oh, I'm the master distiller here. And Stephen Beam has got all this background and knowledge, and he's been in the business for, 12 years? And he calls himself master distiller now, but I still think that he would prefer practical, even though he knows everything I think you could possibly know about bourbon. He still thinks that his great-grandfather and his great-great-grandfather and his great-great-great-grandfather probably had some tricks in their bags that he doesn't know yet. You got all that on your shoulders. You want to do respect to what was the previous people and doing it in a lot different circumstances.
And when I say this, I don't mean any disrespect towards anybody else, but one of the things that I've always appreciated about Steve Beam is he's not resting on the last name and kicking his feet up and saying, go make whiskey and use my name to promote it. He's done the work. He's lived it. He's
walk in the distillery at 2:00 in the morning. What are you doing here, Steve? Well, I had these mash tanks that I have to check the temperatures on because, at this time we're in 80-gallon hogshead wine barrels. And he's checking the mash to make sure that he doesn't lose the mash tank overnight. And he's in there with the dogs. And he's sleeping a couple hours at a time, between his shifts, doing up in the Lazy Boy up top. I've seen his work ethic. And he has outworked me every day that I've been at that distillery. There's no way to outwork a Fante. And by God, he does it every time. And he's 10 years older than me. And I don't know how he does it. But, he can outwork me. He definitely, I give my hands up.
Those are the bosses and owners you want to work for, though.
Yeah.
The ones that are like, I'm in it, too. It's not just you. I'm in the shit, too. And it's an inspiration when you see that. You're like, oh, shit, now I gotta come in an hour early.
What have I done lately? I've seen what he's doing. What have I done lately?
Hey guys, let's talk about this single barrel here. Drew, what do you think, buddy?
Yeah, it nose is completely different than the other one where, some of those grain bill notes come forward. This one is a lot more what I think of when I think of a traditional, bourbon whiskey mash bill. You, of course, have the caramel vanilla. We all get that every time. The thing that stands out to me on this one is a little bit of kind of a stone fruit, almost like a peach, maybe even something a little bit more bright, something like a Gala apple. Kind of get that up front. And mid-palate really develops into this nice cinnamon candy kind of a thing for me. Finishes really sweet, almost like a, those pain au chocolate pastries. It's kind of like a croissant with the chocolate in the middle.
Right.
I get the powdered sugar and pastry note kind of on the back end. So really, really pleasant. One of the things I like about this one, whereas the malted rye kind of doesn't have peaks or valleys, this one has 3 kind of distinct stages for me, which I like, especially if I'm going through several different things through, and I want to have those different moments. And so I kind of like that this one breaks it up a little bit. So very, very good. I enjoy this, and wildly different from the family recipe one, which is always cool too.
Yeah. Patrick? Caught him mid-sip.
He did, but that's because he went with stone fruit, and at the moment he said stone fruit, he went lighter, and I was going darker in my mind. So I had to go back to that. I get a little bit of like a leathery brown sugar note that stands out, not heavy, but like kind of light in there. The back like you said, it has different stages and it jumps, and I like the way it does it. It almost feels a little thin at first in the front, and then over the back, 2/3, like the viscosity for me picks up. And then I'm starting getting more of the barrel to finish. I'm getting this. It's like I can't figure out the cookie, but there is a cookie I am getting here, and I'm going to take a minute to try to figure this out, but because it's not, it has a little bit of the grain in it, but it still has that nice flavor on the end. Go ahead, sir.
Can I make a suggestion? No. So you know those Biscoff cookies that you get on airplanes from time to time? There's a little bit of that on the back end. I don't know if that's the lane that you're going down, but that's kind of what it reminded me of.
I was thinking Apple Jacks.
Because
2/3 of the way through,
yeah. There is that cinnamon note in it. There is some apple note in it. Although the apple's not that as strong, but it kind of has that feel of an Applejack in it, along with those classic bourbon notes of vanilla and caramel. And Pat, I agree. There's some leather in there too. But it's much.
It's not aggressive for all that in there.
No, not at all. And at 115 proof, this thing is dangerous.
They do drink a lot smoother than what the proof states.
Because I could sit on the deck and polish that bottle off, and it would not be that difficult to do. But to compare and contrast the two, I think there is a very significant difference between them.
Oh yeah.
And that doesn't mean one's inferior at all, but it's different, and different is good. Different and here's the question. Different is bold, Stephen. I mean, you come up with this family recipe that's very different than the whiskey that you've had before. That's a bold thing to do, right?
It is.
I like that this is like when you're doing the tasting and these are right next to it. This is like stepping back into history. This is like walking backwards what someone had 100, 150 years ago. And this is kind of like, I don't want to say a different variant of it, but as you progress in time, things change. And you can still see a little bit of the line, but like I said, it is drastically different. I'd love to see what white corn. Sorry, I'm starting to think in my head. I'm putting white corn and other stuff. Now I'm starting to play with mash bills in my head. I gotta stop.
Now, Stephen, I don't want to distract the conversation from the whiskey, but I understand you guys do something pretty different with barrel entry proof than what some of your other craft counterparts do. Could you speak to that just briefly?
Yeah, pre-prohibition, it wasn't all about money. It was about selling great whiskey. And pre-prohibition, before they ran everybody out of business, and you had 200, 300 different distilleries in operation. You had all these entry proofs at much lower proofs than where they go in at now. And I do believe that it changes the characteristics of your finished products dramatically. One of the kudos I have to Maker's Mark is the fact that they do about 107 proof entry proof. And we're doing to be about 105 in those experimentals to 107 in between there. And we're doing pre-prohibition proofing on our barrels of whiskey, which I think in the long run, if you're the Exxon Valdez of whiskey and you're putting out 10 billion barrels a year, it's going to make a difference in the bottom line, and the bean counter should be involved, I guess. and take it to the extreme proofing category that it could possibly be to be bourbon, and take it up to that level. And there are folks that make great whiskey at that level. Mm-hmm. But for family tradition, mm-hmm. for heritage of 7th-generation Beams, the entry proof is pre-prohibition proofing.
Mm-hmm. Is that the entry proof on the family recipe in that 107 range?
I would say it was. I can't tell you for a fact because I wasn't making the whiskey at that time. I haven't made much whiskey in my life, actually. When he lets me on the still, it's always with supervision. He's afraid I'll blow something up. Keep me out of the kitchen.
Someone lets you go do something at the same time. They're like watching you from. No, not that.
No, don't turn that. No, that's going to be catastrophic if you turn that. I'm like, okay.
Wow. So another product that you guys offer every year is the limited edition.
Yeah,
that's always very interesting. Do you have a hint for us as to what the 2022 limited edition would be?
Yes, it's great.
That's a good hint.
I've tasted it.
They've all been great. They've all been great.
It was phenomenal. He brought it to me. He let me taste it. He don't tell me what's in it. I don't figure out what's in it until after it's already on the shelf, and then he's like, "Oh, by the way, this is what I did."
By the way,
he wants my honest and valued opinion. He doesn't want my input. He just wants to know that it doesn't suck. So here, Fante, taste this and tell me that is it good? Does it need anything? What do you think about it? Give me your honest and valued opinion. And I tasted it, and it was extraordinary, and I'm excited about it, and I have no idea. I think he does this for a purpose. He knows I'll share, and so you don't get it because he don't tell me.
Oh, the gift of plausible deniability. It's a beautiful thing.
It is.
I'll tell you this: the what was it, 2021 or 2020 was it, that had the finish in the Armagnac casks?
Yes.
Oh man.
Like a cognac, Armagnac is a cognac from Armagnac, a much more expensive cognac, hard to come by. Finished in those casks, it was a wonderful just enhancement to the bourbon, not overpowering the whiskey. The whiskey was forward, and the hint of something in the background was there, and that's what he tries to do when he does a finished product, is only let it be a hint in the background that there's something unique and different to this whiskey that I'm not sure what it is, but it sure is good.
Yeah, and we didn't taste it tonight, but this minor case rye is a perfect example of really well handled finishing. Finishing in the hands of somebody that knows what they're doing, they're not trying to cover up a mistake by putting it in a secondary barrel. They're adding something to the flavor profile. It's an additive thing, not an attempt to hide a mistake. And
cream sherry casks.
Yep.
Finished in those, giving it a fruit nose with a fruit finish. Makes the best damn Manhattan. Says so on our hang tags. It's in print. Has to be true.
I love that one. I've got a special place in my heart for that one. It was one of the first ryes that I really fell in love with, and then started dating a girl a while back that doesn't care much for whiskey, and that was our gateway to get her in. And now she can probably tell you more than I could, but yeah, that's a great one. Big fan of that, and we go over and see Chris at Westport to pick that up every time we run out.
Yeah. So, what does your mash bill on rye whiskey have to be?
51%.
51% rye.
What does your mash bill on gin have to be?
On what now?
Gin.
I'm not a gin guy, so I'm going to pass.
Well, that's just stepping right off, isn't it? Boy, that's an easy out. I'm not a gin guy. It's 51% juniper.
Oh, well, I knew it was
yeah. And guess what happens when you put 51% juniper in a gin? Doesn't taste like a pine forest. What do most gins taste like? Pine forest,
right?
Because they're 75%, 80%, 90% juniper, and so therefore, Mr. Beam's gin is just over the cusp of being gin. Mr. Beam's minor case rye whiskey is just over the cusp of being a rye, 6 points higher in corn, and that would be a bourbon distillate. So for all those people out there that say I don't like rye whiskey, and you introduce them to Minor Case Rye, you are twisting their head. They're like, I've never tasted anything like this in my life. Tastes this good in rye. And that's what Beam likes to do. He likes to mess with your head. He likes to put things at just over the cusp of what they are to be what they are, and then mess with your head. You come into our distillery, tell him you don't like gin, he's going to put gin in your hand, son. He's going to put bowling and birch in there with 19 different botanicals. That, son, is more botanicals than Colonel Harlan Sanders had spices in his chicken recipe. Leave it to the Colonel, Colonel Beam.
All right. You just sent me this picture. So tell us about what's going on here.
That is Elton John's piano, and that's Stephen Beam on the keyboard, and that is at his concert, and we are on a VIP backstage back passes tour with his band members, and they teach us about his entire collection of pianos and how they are tuned to his specific needs, how the keystrokes are lighter because of his finger width and length, so that they compress easier, and we're sitting at a multi-million-dollar piano because that's going to be auctioned at the end of his tour to raise money for AIDS and AIDS research.
Wow.
Yeah. The Ryan White Foundation is where that money will go, is what I understood from his pianist that travels with him and tunes all his pianos.
Yeah. So where was this? Where was this?
This is at the Yum Center.
The Yum Center here in Louisville.
And that was just after I fell down the steps and twisted my ankle. And Beam was like, "Are you kidding me? If you've got to go to the hospital, you're going on your own, son. I'm going to the piano."
That sounds like such a cool story. Like, as you were saying it, like the hairs on my arms started standing up. I'm like, that's just, you hear that and it's like, if I could have been there, it's just that feel rushes over you, man. That's fantastic.
We were in the third row, center stage, and his piano moved all the way across the stage. We got to see him within like 4 feet of us playing and watching him play. It was absolutely an extraordinary experience, a once-in-a-lifetime event, and it was done right. And I appreciate Steve for taking me to the concert, and it was an awesome evening.
Yeah.
Very cool.
That is very cool. That is very cool. All right. So, Stephen, you've given us a little over an hour, hour and 15 minutes of your time now, and we really appreciate that, but we want to respect you and your evening. Man, what a great time. And when I selected the whiskeys we were going to drink, I didn't really know how it would all pan out. But I think what we've got here is a very nice display of the spectrum of flavor that you guys produce there at Limestone Branch. This is all just fantastic. And,
what do you expect from a 7th generation bean? That ain't a bad decision on our shelves.
That's for darn sure. For darn sure. You're one of my favorite pitchmen. I'm just gonna say it. I love it. I love it so much.
You lob them up there, I'm gonna hit them out of the park.
If you're not getting job offers every day from every industry you can conceive of to go pimp their brand, somebody's not paying attention. Oh, my goodness. All right. So we're going to start wrapping up the show. And as we do, let's talk about where folks can find each of you on social media. Stephen, where are you on social media?
Bourbon Scout 1872. That is my social media. The very first park inception was in 1872, Yellowstone National Park. And the very first park rangers in that park were scouts. And if you notice my page, you'll see the badge that they carried when they were the first park rangers. So Bourbon Scout 1872, Instagram and Facebook. Yep. I do not tweet. I will not tweet. I am not a Twitter.
Yeah, I got a feeling we'll learn why here in just a second. Drew, where can people find you on social media?
Oh man, you can find my Twitter at Drew Crawley 63. That's for where I'm being a snarky little twerp most of the time. And then you can follow my music stuff on Instagram mostly at Drew.Crawley63. We are 12 days away from the first single from the second record coming out. So really excited to share more about that in days to come. And just spent the day with Lorenzo working on some brainstorming. So excited to get to share some of the new projects coming with you guys.
Well, while you're waiting on the new music, there's where you can find the well, it's not old. It's what, less than a year.
About 6 months old. Yeah.
So this is the first EP that Drew put out. So you can stream that on Spotify or Apple or YouTube, and it is fantastic stuff. Drew's a very talented singer songwriter. So, Patrick, how about yourself, man?
You can follow our show on Facebook and YouTube, on My Whiskey Den, also on Instagram, but we don't do shows there. We'll just have posts about how you can link to it. Shows every Monday night, typically live. Not tomorrow because I'm going to be on a plane. So not that, but next week we will. Shows coming up in July. We are having David Shop from Natural Spirits come on, and then the week after we're having Murphy Quint come on from Cedar Ridge.
Awesome. Hey, for Bourbon Turntable, I mean, we're everywhere. You can YouTube, go subscribe on YouTube. We're also on podcast platforms, Apple, Spotify, Google. You can follow us on Instagram. You can follow us on Facebook. We do have we have an account on Twitter. We don't do a whole lot with that because it is pretty sarcastic and snarky these days. And we're nice people. So
since when?
Yeah.
I missed the memo that we were nice now.
Do what we can. All right. Hey, and Drew, our next episode is coming out.
Next one is one I'm really looking forward to. So we're going to have good buddies of Kevin and mine, Mark, Tom, and Will, on from our group, the Bourbon Fellowship here in Louisville, talking about bourbon clubs, what we do for tastings, how we keep it fresh, the way that life and whiskey and music all kind of play over one another. So looking forward to that one. If you're part of a club, definitely tune in. Or if you want to be a part of the club, I think we set a pretty good example and a model for how those need to go. So check that show out. It's going to be great.
Yeah. And we've got some shows coming up this summer that are going to be really, I think, going to be a lot of fun. We've got Adam Stump from Stumpy Spirits. We've got Hunter Coffee from Three Boys. We have Lenny Eckstein from Deerhammer out in Colorado. We're going to have Steve Gorman, who was the drummer for the Black Crows back in the good old days. He's going to be on the show this summer. So we've got a lot of great things coming up for you guys. So please be sure to subscribe to us, follow us in social, so that you're sure not to miss anything that you would really, really enjoy. So on behalf of, wait, I got to get something in my glass so I can do the last toast. Excuse me. A little bit more of this family recipe.
I'm going to blend them.
Okay. All right. There you go. So, all right. Very smooth ending here. But on behalf of Patrick and Drew, we want to thank Stephen for joining us, and congratulations on the family recipe that you now have out. And until next time, cheers, love, and free bird. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Right.